So start to pay more attention to your exhale. One of the things I like about what Kevin said to me, I don't know if he said it on the call, during the workshop, is that when one of the reasons why he has to tell his story so many times in order to get him better and better is that as he tells his story more times, he knows how to breathe while he's telling the story. And that as he realizes how to control his breath right in storytelling, he actually learns more about the story, not just about how to tell it. So that exhale, and then the spark of inhalation, the beginning of expansion. But on this end of this next exhalation, don't be in a rush to start the inhalation, because another part of your breath is that slight little space between the two, between the bottom of exhalation and the beginning of inhalation. And then after you empty out on the next exhalation, see if you can start to engage the lift in your chest in conjunction with the inhalation. Can you exhale all the way, relief down at the bottoms of your feet? Soften around the temples, the jaw, the inside of the mouth. Can you perceive more when your brain is in more neutral? Yep, you can receive more too, to your mind. And then start to activate. Press down to the floor. Would be a difference between pressing down to your big toe mound and pressing down to your inner heel, especially when you're trying to ground. And there's a reason why I always say inner groin, inner knee, inner heel, because I want to activate the lift in the core channel, right? So you hit down and you rise up and go up the front part of your spine, lift under the collarbones, broaden on the back side between the shoulder blades. Become sturdy, strong, and alert. But don't freeze on the inside. Let the breath continue the movement. So sturdiness and structure don't at first require the movement of breath, but they will eventually. So as you're sitting upright and more sturdy and more soft, as you go inward, let the breath be the introduction of movement and rhythm into a space that's always there. Let go of your day. Prepare your mind for the integration of yoga. Good, and then release. Take your sternum up towards your chin now, and then chin down over your sternum. Letting this introduce a change in structure. A slight more position that brings slightly more clarity to the expansive emptiness. Raise your head up with closed eyes. Open your eyes. So this idea that there was already something there, something in that quiet. It doesn't have to be something, the quiet itself, the inward part was always there. So like I can tell I haven't been sleeping great this weekend. So when I was going inward and sitting there with you, I could feel my body slightly vibrating from fatigue, right? So like that's part of, like, in a way, the centering part is also like taking your own temperature, right? You get to use it to measure stuff, right? And then it's like, wait, all of a sudden I realize that when I'm like vibrating like that, I'm not receiving what was already there as well as I could be, right? So now sit up straight and tall again, not too much strain, and see, and just then naturally adjust your body, naturally, the instructions, right? But see if you can find a way to be more congruent or receive what was already there. So right away for me, when I do that, I start to realize I'm holding at the base of my neck, on the back side by my atlas vertebrae. Like I'm out discovering stuff, right? This is why you practice. This is part of the story. So one of the things that Kevin and I were trying to emphasize in the wrap up of that all day workshop was that, we've all been told that myths and stuff, stories, but especially myths, like creation myths, are trying to give explanations for things we don't understand, right? And he absolutely profoundly disagrees with this. That in fact, stories are to connect you to the mystery, not to explain them, right? That's why, like, if you take one we've all grown up with, like if you're Christian at all, is the Genesis story, right? And it's like 7 days, it's a story that you don't have to believe literally. But the fact that something came out of nothing and something is here rather than nothing at all, that's the mystery. Doesn't matter how you tell the story, right? One of the things that yoga opens you to and centering opens you to is the underlying expansive mystery of what was already here, right? So sit up again, and I'm not asking you to meditate because that's a whole different thing. I'm asking you to, like, all of a sudden smile and go, holy crimes. And so one of the things that gets unfortunate for people that live with trauma and with people with disabilities, that in that quiet, it's actually kind of can be scary, like a dark room. No, actually, find your own relationship to what you don't get to control. So it helps. I feel better about my relationship to what I don't get to control when I lift my chest, when I ground my sitting bones, when I feel my feet. The structure of asana doesn't change the unknowable. It receives it. That's why you do poses. It starts to come through you. You don't have to know where the source of it is. You just have to feel it. So like right away by feeling enemies, I can tell this, I'm tighter right here, right? And so I need to kind of open there. So which that usually means for me, one of my sitting bones, I need to get more weight through one of my sitting bones. And so all these things, right? But the only thing that's changing is my ability to receive. I'm not creating anything, right? That's part of the receiving story. And so notice the breath into each nostril, into each lung, or if you're breathing through your mouth, into each lung and each sitting bone. And let there be a softening around the temples, so there's a quiet between the temples. Be aware of your back body. Let it be nourishing, soft, like a silk curtain. You want to bring this part of you with you in asana. Good. And then take that part and bring your hands, if you can, into prayer. I have to lean back now so I can stay upright. Now I'm going to try to add more to it and equalize the pressure between my hands. watch how my head is too far forward. I don't know what your head is doing. Now I'm going to start to activate. I'm going to connect the heel of my hands, open the center of my palm, stretch up through each finger, hit down through my sitting bones, extend from the inner groin to the inner knee, down to the inner heel. I'm going to increase the pressure between my hands. Lift under the collarbones. Drop the skin down the back body. Now I'm going to make sure I'm not pressing my hands too hard together. It's all here already, actually. Good. And then release. All right. So now then you get to like, that's the serious part. Now we got to bring some movement into it. So come forward, and so you can also start your practice by going right to movement, right? Either way is fine. And you should practice both ways. So come forward and back. But when I do it from quiet and then I introduce movement, I'm more aware of the whole story that happens behind the movement, right? So I'm just going back and forth, opening it up, and then side to side, right? So I'm just going to keep changing my relationship to gravity, right? Oh, the side to side feels better than the forward and back this morning, which is usually not the case, right? So I'm going to go back and then off to the side and then forward, right? And then off to the side and back and go back over the chair, adding my neck this time if I want to, and then over and forward. And then I know that I need to exercise both hemispheres of my brain. So I'm going to go the other way. And it doesn't feel right. I'm going to go the other way forward. What the hell? I have to really work to go what I think is probably clockwise. I think it's ironic that I like counterclockwise, right? And then go back and around, right? And then find the center. And then this time as I go over to the over, I'm going to take my arm over too and start increasing this awareness, right? But I'm going to do it from my skin first and then release. And then, right, without trying to make it, I'm just trying to, oh boy, this side's tighter, right? That's a good place for me. I'm going to hang here for a while, right? And then go back. And then the second time, I go, oh, right? That one's that one. And here comes the contrast. Oh, I need freedom over here. So I'm going to hang. So whichever side opens better for you, we're going to do it one more time. And you hang on the side that you can tell needs to open more. For me, it's less time this way, right? And then I'm going to go and hang a little bit longer on the other side and figure out what I need to do to feel more freedom here, right? So I'm figuring out what other adjustments I need to make to maximize the sensation, right? And then come on back. Now, and I know that on Mondays, I always want you to find length in your low back. Come forward, whether it's on your thighs or I'm leaning forward on my desk, but I want that space, right? But I don't want it just to collapse. I want the length of my low back while lifting my sternum, right? So I'm actually creating structure. So when I breathe now and I'm forward, for me, when I'm forward and breathe, it's easier for me to get my breath down lower in my torso, especially on the back body, not the front as much. So I'm just using my breath to actually, can anyone feel like I must have slept funny last night? I can feel a couple of like places where my skin or my ribs are folded over each other on my back body because of how I slept. So I'm like watching those spots and trying to, I know for me, because my scoliosis, I have to derotate my spine and try to get more awareness on the left side of my torso near my spine. I don't know what the story is for you. I want you to find your own story, right? And figure out in a position What's funny is when I lean forward like this, nobody knows 2/3 of the time what I'm doing. I sit like this a lot. I'm actually like feeling stuff, and no one knows that I'm actually inflating myself when I'm leaning forward, right? But that's what I want you to do right now. And use your breath. And so, of course, one of the tricks of yoga is to move in opposite directions. So hit more overtly through your sitting bones and lift under each side of your collarbone, but now broaden between the shoulder blades, right? And lift on the collarbones again, and now hit back to your sitting bones. And so, one of the real simple things in yoga is it's constantly making your mind engage the body in directions that seem contradictory, but they're not. And take a couple of breaths. Good. And then come on back up. So we're all heading into the holidays. Wouldn't it be great if you could stay mentally and physically limber through the holidays here? I guarantee you there's going to be some shit that annoys you this next month. Just so you know, there's something, it's going to be a bugger somewhere in here, right? So I want the space. So take your left arm up and bring it down. We're just going to gentle little twist. And so, like, keeping supple, right? Being able to refine a shape or your shape. So and then come on back to center. One of the things that I think was really, there's a lot of insightful stuff I want to kind of share with you over time from that workshop, and then go the other way. Was that, so on the call, and then inhale, lift up, exhale, revolve. On the call, and then come forward again. Because Kevin and I don't hold a medical license as a psychologist, come forward. Dan Libby had to be on the screen, who's a clinical psychologist. Otherwise, they wouldn't have got continuing ed. So lift under the collarbones, right? So I'm leaning forward here. And so there was a really good conversation, and it was such an illustration of the difference between a story focus and a treating focus. And then come back up, and then take your left arm up, exhale, back around. We're going to move with some pace here. Up, down, turn, back, up, down, turn. This time I changed my twist. Now my forearm is down on my leg, and I'm grabbing behind my chair. So this twist is very different. So do this one while you're leaning forward a little bit more. Because when I'm leaning forward, I get that elongation in my back. Right? And then come back to center, and then up, and then down, but this time onto your forearm. Grab the chair where you want. So now you're in a different kind of twist. Right? Just a warm up, right? And then come on back to center. So Kevin has a definition of resiliency where he thinks that you grow towards resiliency throughout your life too. You're not just born with it. And that it has to do with, like, when you have trauma or whatever it is, like, you lose some of your shape, right? And the resiliency is the ability to regain and grow towards a different shape while keeping enough of your old shape, right? Whereas for Dan Libby, the psychologist, resilience is the ability to withstand ordinary and extraordinary challenges in life. So think about the difference of those words in those stories, right? Yes, you do have to withstand stuff, right? Yes, maybe you need to also know that your shape is fluid and you can regain shape, because you're never going to be able to undo it. You're not going to be able to withstand everything, right? So these aren't little, in that story, those are really important different phrases. And resiliency has both. All right, stretch your arms down to your sides, right? Lift under the collarbone. So now you're making it sturdier, right? This core channel, right, that goes down, and it's going to be more connected to your inner heels. Just notice, so everyone just on the floor if you can, and I can't physically do this, but I can do it chronically or whatever. The idea of what it would, everyone that can, push down through the balls of your feet and notice what you feel when your feet are flat. Now don't push down through the balls of your feet, more push down more for your heel, through your heels. And notice the change, right? One's got more bass in it, right? So connect to your heels, right? So, and press down through your heels and get the inside edge of your legs. Hit down through both sitting bones, but rise up through the core. So Tadasana is trying to make sure that this core channel, all the way down to the floor, whether you're standing or not, right, actually gets things surrounding it. Right, so that's why we tell you to feel each sitting bone, feel each foot, each side of the under the collarbones, because you're trying to get it. So by feeling the boundary around it, you can feel the core within it. Right, and then heart start to hit down and rise up simultaneously. Right, and then you just add the arm pieces. Take the left arm off. Now, once you go off with one arm, right, something's changing your sitting bones. So as my left arm is up, I'm going to press down through my right sitting bone and right foot a little bit more, because I'm going to try to keep the midline farther forward on the radar, and then release, and then take the other arm. See, damn it, here I have a harder time, right? Getting it to feel as yogic, right? So now, so this is the side I probably need to work on a little bit more. So I'm gonna, right, and then release. And so we're gonna do it one more time, and I want you to figure out which side you should stay a little longer on, right, and stay there. So here's, for me, this is the easy one. So, right, so, and then I'm gonna switch to the other one and hold it, work on the other one twice as long. But you do whichever one you perceive to need the more work. Figure out how to utilize your breath. See, I shake on this one. This is harder on my nervous system. Good, and then release. So now arms down at my sides. So now I want you to pay special attention. So I'm readjusting on my sitting bones, because I want to keep both sitting bones in my awareness, right? And for me to feel the back of my heels, or my heels, I kind of have to do it from the back of my eyes, like from a place that's back. I called that last week swimming underwater, right? And then I'm putting my arms down at my sides. And I want to make sure, can anyone feel differences between the inner edge of each shoulder blades? I'm sure you can, right? Try to make sure. And then what's different on each shoulder blade is going to change what's happening here. So I want you to take some time to actually figure out how to work your arms, open your elbow pits, broaden across your palms, stretch your arms down, lift down the collarbones, but do so in a way that adjusts and makes more symmetrical your structure, so the midline can be better received, right? So you're doing all this stuff because there's an unknowable, mysterious part of the core channel, right, in a yoga pose. And so I'm just trying to do the preparations to see if my mind today will open to it. Good, and then release. So this core channel, the bandhas in yoga actually travel through this core channel, right? And so I want you to take your hands on each knee, push back and get the rise in your chest. But figure out which knee maybe and which hip needs to, and sitting bone needs to maybe get more activated. For me, it's the left always. It's always the left. Right. And so I'm going to try to use my hands on my knees as the thing that I can adjust in order to have it flow through me more symmetrically. Now, damn it, I wish I had a third hand, right? Because I wish I had another hand to push right on this side of my rib cage. I can feel them leaking right here. Now, I don't know, and that's because I have scoliosis, but I'm telling you, there's one side you're leaking out more than the other. Right? Mine's just more overt. And so I want you to get that full. Because this type of connection to the unchanging, is what has to maintain as the poses get more difficult. Good, and then release. And then widen your base. So I'm taking my feet off the pedals. So I have less connection to the floor at first. Right, so now I want you to be more aware of this triangle between where your knees are and where your tailbone is. So once you see that triangle from your sitting bone out to your knee, from your tailbone out to your knees, then find your sitting bones. Then see, as you've been lifting your chest, are you lifting one side of your torso more than the other? Right? Probably, you got work to do. Right? Here's my problem right there. Right? So I gotta like figure out, because I want these next couple of breaths to feed into an expansive sense of myself. Right? So one of the really interesting things that the neuroscientist was talking about, Ruth Laney, is, so again, you're staying big and in space. Ooh, I gotta balance my head over my neck, right? Good, and then release, so, and then bring your legs back together. So she studies the brain, right? And she's, as a clinical psychiatrist, she's also very interested in sense of self. And the way she studies the brain and what they think is a deeper connection to self that flashes in the brain is what they call the default mode network, which is the way your brain fires when it's at rest. Okay, so when there may be a little bit of an introspection and memory retrieval, but like when you're quiet, right, how your brain lights, and it tends to light right down the midline of your brain, right? And so like that idea that there's a firing that's happening even when you think you're quiet, right? So think about what yoga is trying to do. I'm always trying to get you to soften your tongue and go to that place of rest. There's a relationship between this default mode network and rest, and trying to get you to activate that part of you, the restful part of you, or the way your brain fires when it's not active, into action. And then you start going, yoga's after self-realization kind of makes sense. All right. So when I tell you to find your core channel, right? So again, plant your feet, your sitting bones, lift your chest equally, right? And try to find the midline. Think about the instructions I've also been giving about now, as you're sitting up straight and tall with an alert spine, like this is a weird instruction. Try to soften down the midline of your brain. Whatever you think that could be like. You'll get better at it as you practice. For me, in order to keep attention to my midline of my body and try to feel what I kind of think might be the midline of my brain, right? I have to let my brain recede from the inner edges of my skull, right? But regardless, all of this attempt is in a quieter place. I can't do this kind of retrieval actively. I have to use the default mode network. Good, and then release. So now we're going to take your legs wide again. So this idea that this midline, let's just say, whether it's literally true or metaphorically true, Ruth suspects the connection between the midline of the brain and the default mode network and the midline in a yoga pose. One of the reasons why we work together and I'm on her team is that we're trying to see how they're connected, right? So in order for me to have my knees apart and my feet down on the floor, and now I have to go to my midline too. So when I ask you to press your hands on your knees, find your tailbone, find that triangle, right? And then find your sitting bones, right? And then lift under the collarbones and broaden between the shoulder blades while keeping the shoulder blades in and down. We're literally trying to expand the core channel in the body. And there's a decent chance that maybe lights the default mode network, the mohawk of self differently, right? So these things that look like they're just kind of dumb poses, maybe aren't, right? And now I got to change gravity. I'm going to lose some of it, but now I'm going to take my arms wide too. Some of you, like I fall back as soon as I don't grab my knees, but so some of you don't. So like stay in bigger space, find the core channel, feel each sitting bone where the heel of each foot is on the floor, lift the chest, work the underside of the arms, balance the head over the neck, and watch how your inhalation and exhalation expands your rib cage. In other words, creates movement at the core channel out into space. Good, and then release. And then your legs still wide, lean over towards pressing weight on what would be giving you mirrored instructions on your left, right? And now I'm starting to lift my chest. We've done this a lot, right? But now we're thinking about the midline more, and that this might actually connect. You want the quiet part of the pose to be present within the active part of the pose, because you want the default mode network, which is connected more to, they think, to the sense of self, to be part of the movement, right? So there's a lot going on in these instructions. And then take the arm up. So now we're getting more expansive, right? So now, instead of just reaching up beyond my fingertips, I want my whole rib cage to reach beyond my fingertips. But to do that, I have to take my shoulder blade in and down. And I have to feel if I'm stretching out to my right hand, my left sitting bone and left foot even more. So I'm trying to not just think. Now, when you open to your back body, notice you open more to what's quiet, i.e. default mode network. Good, and then release. Be in the center. So what would be great? One of the things in the discussion with Ruth was can habit transform neural networks? The answer is yes. That's all we really have is habits. The way your brain fires each and every day, right? So now lean over the other direction, press down, right? Find the grounding so you can realize the midline, right? Even to include through your brain, right? And then take the arm up. And now I really got to figure out, I want to be expansive because I want myself to enter the world, right? But in order for my authentic self to not be tied up in the success of my outer body, I have to include the quieter part of me. But I can ground it, drop the shoulder blade in, go beyond the fingertips, press down. If you're taking your left arm up, press down through your right sitting bone and right foot more. So I get to bring structure. Then I'm going to balance my head over my neck so I don't lose the resting part of the default mode network. And breathe. Let now the rib cage and the expansion of the midline. So expand in every direction on inhalation, lengthen down through your spine and exhalation. Up and down through your spine. Good. And then release. Bring your legs back together. More connection to the midline. So now I'm putting my feet down flat and I'm having a dry winter voice, right? I want you to touch on each side of your knees. And in fact, for me, it's a little better up here. So I'm going to push my thumbs into my femur bones right about mid-femur. I don't know where you want to do it. Figure it out. Because what I want to do is create a nourishing surrounding of the midline that goes through my legs. So I know I'm giving you kind of a heady class today, but I want to show you how much some of this like translates into the neuroscience too, right? And then take a couple of breaths. And then release. So what's interesting too is that we can talk about this if you guys have questions over the next like weeks, all of next year, right? One of the things that they are studying in relation to people who have trauma, but everybody, is this idea of peripersonal space, like the space right around your body and when it gets violated. And they find that people that have a lot of trauma have an oversensitive, sometimes rigid peripersonal space. So violation is triggering, or a peripersonal space that lacks boundary. And in general, people with trauma have a boundaryless peripersonal space behind them. So they startle from what they cannot see, like deeply, right? But this peripersonal space around the spine is only, so they actually figured out ways they think they can measure. I don't know how the hell they did that, right? But you have like a bubble. Think about like Will Rogers. You have a peripersonal space around your head, which when someone gets too close to your face, your brain goes, right? Right? There's another like bubble around your torso, and everyone's changes. But the other thing that's interesting, there's bubbles around your hands. When something comes in proximity to your hands, something changes in your brain, right? And also your feet, right? So this sense of how you are within the space around you, right? So I want everyone to lean over to the right, right? So when you press down and I tell you to lift your chest, you're expanding this space around you, right? Your brain is getting more active. A smaller peripersonal space would be when you drop your chest. You wouldn't be aware of your periphery as much, right? What's around you. Open it up and expand it, right? Take the arm up, right? So now in order for me to not just imagine I've got bigger bubbles, bigger mitts around my hands, I'm going to drop my shoulder blade into my torso. I'm going to make sure my spine is sturdy. I'm hitting down, rising, so I can feel more. I've always thought in Trikonasana, triangle pose, all the sunlight and joy was in the upper hand. So Gene, tilt your head in line with, yeah, right? And so make this really big. Think about expanding the connection around your hands by grounding through the midline of your own body. I hope you touch more of the world this week. I'm going to try, right? Good. And then come back. So what if I could decide, I like this. So I saw this graphic of, they drew a bubble around the cartoonist's head, guy's head, around his hands, around his torso. So he was a series of bubbles that were surrounding his body, right? I'm going to try this week to keep my hand bubble and my torso bubble working together, right? So I'm going to go over this way, right? And I'm going to get grounded so I can expand this. Remember, it's going to take the midline to get the expansion, then take the arm up. I'm going to find ways to make the space around my hand feel more happy and expressive by finding each sitting bone, finding each foot. So Mary, you got to take your head back a little bit, chin down a little bit, or your chin toward, or your chin, tilt your head towards your arm that's not out, shoulder. Right, there you go. Right, and so you're trying to connect the bubble around your torso, and even where your feet are, connected to the bubble around your hands. Make sure your head bubble's not getting in the way. Let all the space in. Good, and then release. What I love, and then sit up in the center. One of the things that I really love is that all these instructions that I give about the back body and opening the space behind you, all of a sudden I hear this whole series of lectures about the bubble behind you and how it needs to stay not too rigid, but not too open. It's like, yeah, you're being taught these things in asana. So sit up straight and tall. Lift the chest, feel the sitting bones. But when I ask you to drop a silk curtain down from the back of your neck to your tailbone, right? Hopefully you actually process that it's silk and not like canvas, right? And you actually let it be soft. So the awareness on the back body drops softly and elegantly as the front body lifts. So what you want is the softness of the back body to take the very subtle violence out of how you lift the front body, right? So you want an integration of front and back to take advantage of the structure of your feet, sitting bones, and collarbones, right? So you have the structure in place, and then you add this kind of exquisite balance between front and back body into the structure, and take a couple of breaths. Make them exquisite, not just the breath, but how the breath is felt. Good, and then release. Now take your arms behind you and very gently from the backside, open peripersonal space in front of you, right? So now you're trying to get more active on the front, more active on the back, but still trying to find the balance. I have to go inward towards rest to find the balance. Good, and then release. Take that sense of action into a sense of symmetry and start preparing for Shavasana. So I'm going to quick know that I got to go through each foot, each sitting bone, each side of my breastbone, my inner inside edge of my shoulder blades. Ooh, closed here, right? So I need to open. In order to open, I have to ground. Trust my structure. And then bring your hands into whatever position is good for your Shavasana. Soften your jaw, the inside of your mouth. For whatever reason, the first time I ever heard my teacher say, let go of your teeth or your gums, it was a big one. Lips together, teeth slightly apart. Feel your breath. Don't change it. Thank your body. Thank it again. Start to bring yourself back. Slightly deeper inhalation. Slightly longer exhalation. When you're ready, open your eyes. If it's too bright, close them again. And then choose to open, keeping your eyeballs soft so they receive the energy of the landscape. Keep the center of your chest supplely receiving the visual field. Good. You know, one of the things that I think that yoga doesn't explain the mystery, it reveals it. Right? And that's part of why I practice. Is that, like I said, I think it's the beginning of John O'Donohue's book. It feels strange here. The mystery never leaves you. Right? Everything is actually new. Right? That was Bessel's big point about, I think, that I got out of the workshop, was that people that get in ruts, that are living with chronic conditions or with trauma or extra stress, part of what's so important is to be able to allow in new sensations, not just retrieve old ones, right? And have the confidence to actually receive new sensations, right? And that's what your yoga practice is trying to show you. All right, everybody, hands together if you can. Namaste. Spirit in me bows the spirit in you.